We were not immunologists until a couple years ago, and oncologists have to keep up because things are moving so quickly. And the things that we've discussed today may actually affect your patient's survival more than choosing the right chemotherapy regimen.
Welcome to the very first episode of the Innovate Oncology podcast, presented by Azra AI. We're excited to bring you insightful conversations with leading voices in oncology, healthcare innovation, and artificial intelligence. This podcast aims to explore how cutting-edge technologies are transforming oncology care, from diagnosis to survivorship. For our inaugural episode, we couldn't have asked for two more exceptional guests. Joining us today is Brook Blackmore, Chief Strategy and Product Officer at Azra AI. Brook brings a wealth of experience in driving innovation and creating impactful healthcare solutions. Under her leadership, Azra AI continues to redefine the oncology landscape, ensuring no patient falls through the cracks. We're also honored to have Dr. Douglas Flora, the Executive Medical Director at St. Elizabeth Healthcare. In addition to his leadership at St. Elizabeth, he serves as the Editor-in-Chief of AI and Precision Oncology and as Vice Chair of the American Cancer Society Board. Dr. Flora's work embodies the intersection of clinical excellence and technology innovation. Together, Brook and Dr. Flora dive deep into today's topic, the role of AI in oncology care. In this discussion, they'll explore how AI is reshaping oncology workflows, improving patient outcomes, and addressing critical challenges within the healthcare system. So without further ado, here's Brook Blackmore and Dr. Flora.
Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to really impact oncology cancer patients from a nursing perspective. So I started my career on the floor and had the opportunity to really see firsthand the words, you have cancer and what that means. And so during my time being able to care for those patients, I saw moms who had young children who weren't allowed to be on the floor because these patients' treatments are allowing them to be immunocompromised. And so they get sick easily. And so I saw moms unable to see their kids for months at a time. And I saw, my career kind of shift from not just being a nurse, but to be so much more to these families and patients. And so when I had the opportunity to kind of move into a corporate setting at a large healthcare system and then shift over to my role here at Azra, I've seen innovation in AI not only drive new care for patients and ways to prevent and treat earlier and better and differently, but a huge passion for me is really using AI in the space to make sure that all patients have equal access and opportunity to get the care and the treatment that they want.
And mine was probably a pretty similar route, Brooke. I'm a medical oncologist by training. I've treated breast cancer in our Cincinnati region for about 20 years. Moved about 6 or 7 years ago to an executive leadership role here in our healthcare system, and just found a number of frustrations, a bunch of problems that were happening again and again. And I'm a process guy, and I started to look for solutions to some of these. And automation and tech were very attractive for ways when we were in the middle of staffing crises and just deluged with this tsunami of data. And I started to read more about AI, and then became an early adopter and maybe an AI optimist at that point.
And I think Dr. Flora, AI is so common. I feel like I hear that everywhere in the industry. So I would love to just kind of maybe dive in and understand like what areas of AI are most exciting for you. I can talk about mine too. But from a medical oncology perspective, what excites you most about that?
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated by this stuff because it is coming so quickly that I don't think anyone really knows how to get started. So I have a side thing, a management consulting firm, and I get this question from our clients all the time: How do I start? I don't even know what I need. I just know that I need something because I know that I'm behind, and that's a prevailing thing right now across, especially the United States oncologists. I'd say easy things are automation of rote mechanical tasks, extracting unstructured data from the gigantic electronic medical records that we're all buried in right now, easing documentation burdens for physicians, trying to facilitate the care that nurses provide so well that well, and removing barriers to their levels of care, and then replacing things that are numbing with things that are smarter. And you guys at Azra, I know lots and stuff on automation of lung nodules and tumor board and registry software. And I would love for our folks to have access to tools that let them use their biggest brains at the highest levels of function, and get rid of the stuff that they find boring or numbing.
Yeah, I know in the industry, and I've seen it firsthand and now had the opportunity to see it in hundreds of hospitals is, every navigation program in particular looks a little different. Their rules are a little bit different, but one thing that I see is consistent is they're always manual. They always are manually tracking something. They are always behind. And what I've seen is being able to leverage AI to touch more patients or allow patients to be more prepared for their visits with doctors like you, Dr. Flora, or to understand, what their treatment's going to look like proactively, really helps them be connected, to care sooner, better, earlier, but also, navigators are unique people, clinical or not, they've signed up, they've dedicated their career to a really, really special role in the industry. And so allowing them to do what it is, right, that they were called to do in their career, which is help cancer patients by getting them out of, Excel and out of, typing notes and writing and so much manual administrative task, and allowing them to be with more cancer patients is something that I know has been really interesting to see shift in the industry.
Yeah, we've invested very heavily. I think our navigators are the glue of this building, of our program here, and I think we're up to 8.5 if we count their manager as well, something like that. And it changes monthly as we're growing, but it's an uphill sled. These guys can handle maybe 150, 175 cases at a time before they can't get home to their families and before they're overwhelmed and they can't provide the personal touch that we wanted navigators in the first place to do. And I view tools like these, taking some of the burdens off of them, and maybe that nurse can spend more time on the phone with a patient or hugging a patient, and less time doing data entry. Same thing for tumor registry. Same thing for a lot of us. The physician documentation burdens a couple hours a day, actually a couple hours at night for most of us. We call it pajama time. I would love to see that go away in the next year or two as well, and I think it probably will.
And I think when I first started, really digging into AI and kicked off my career, on this side of the fence, if you will, I saw hesitancy, employees and navigators or registrars and even providers and doctors and administrators worried, right? It's automating my work. I'm not going to be needed anymore. For me, I feel like that has been shifting, I should say, in a really positive direction. Do you feel the same way within the healthcare field and setting from a hospital perspective?
Healthcare lags a couple of years behind other industries. We've seen what Amazon does, or Kroger with your Kroger Plus cards and big data, or even just the way banking and insurance industries have led their old ways to go to these new ways, because there's so much efficiency to be found. Healthcare is maybe the last bastion of inefficiencies, and we have tons. And I think there's an opportunity for us to get in this diligently and responsibly, but recognize that what we're doing presently doesn't work. We're finding cancers too late. We're not discovering drugs soon enough. We're not enrolling enough people in trial. We're not taking equitable care of everyone that we need to take care of. And we're going to need tools to scale. We're going to need tools for physicians, for nurses, for hospital systems to reach the people they need to reach wherever they are, whenever they need us.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the data starts with the cancer registry team and the oncology data specialist, which has been sort of a profession, unfortunately, that is dying. It's really hard to find these individuals.
Super
And
hard.
for anyone listening that is, unfamiliar with this space, this is the team in the hospital that are required, from the state and even national, guidelines to manually track all of the data on any cancer patients that are diagnosed or treated at individual hospitals. And so in the space, they are just manually looking for these patients. The data is lagged. And due to some of the manual work that this team has to do, they're human, right? So some of the data, there's room for error. And they're, of course, doing everything they can, but there's less and less of these individuals, and the requirements of the data that they have to put in is getting more and more complex. And so I have been pleasantly surprised. I think originally working with the cancer registry teams, they aren't used to people investing in them. They were the ones pre-COVID. Now they're a lot of them are at home, but they were the ones, in the basements or in a closet, right? Just doing so much important work that a lot of times, goes unnoticed. And so talking to these teams and implementing Azra's technology where they can, have some of their workflow automated to again drive accurate data, but all of that information leads to better treatment, better trials, and continues to innovate this space. And all the work that they do goes downstream to touch patients' lives, and really impact the space. And so I was asking that question, Dr. Flora, because I have recently, over the last, I'll call it 6 months, seen them. And I've been so impressed seeing the cancer registry teams, the actual oncology data specialists and their managers embrace this and really come out of this. You're trying to take my job versus, wow, we're actually investing in what we do and making sure the work that we do can be scalable and better in the industry.
Yeah, just go back to why we have them, right? This isn't just data entry. This is designed to help patients. We need good data. We need broad sets of data to make good decisions. And the entire idea of tumor boards and of tumor registrars and of COC accreditation is to make sure that we're all meeting the minimum barrier to providing good care. The minimum that we would accept across the country is you've got to do these things to keep people safe. And if that runs 4 months in arrear, how do you process that? So I feel like they're some of the most valued members of our team, but like you said, they're not as visible because they're behind the scenes. But what they do is mission critical for everything that we do for clinical trials and for seeking resources. The way that we build business plans, the way that we decide on how to open clinical trials are based upon the data they give us. And I know they would rather have help than not. And unfortunately, programs like that often can cost some money, but I think it's wisely invested.
Yeah, and it's not just them, right? So, our my CEO and myself were at RSNA last week, and we were watching an interview take place where a radiologist actually said, in AI, we won't have to dictate reports anymore. We will just be able to scale and have, shift our education and what we can do for patients differently. And so it was neat to see someone like in the space recognize, right, that AI is coming for all of us, whether we like it or not, but it will allow us to be there with the patients more and continue to advance care. I always say, my career is successful when I don't have a job anymore in cancer because AI and innovation, right, has taken it to the whole next level where we can find cures, we can find treatments, we can prevent it, right? And you won't need people like me in the seat at Azra any longer. So I think it's something that all of us kind of share together in different ways.
I started with I'm an AI optimist, so I think the way that we restate that sentence for you, they're coming for you to help you. They're not coming for you for your jobs. They're not coming for you to replace you. They just want to augment. And when
Sure.
these tools are introduced for those of us that are time bankrupt every day, it means that we get to spend more time doing the human touches that make us special as oncologists, as nurses. And I just relish the concept of not being responsible for creating data all day long. I'd like to be able to have it at my fingertips to make better decisions as an executive leader. I would love to have it available to make the best decisions for my patients. And I'd love to, the next generation is I'd love to have a little bit of assistance doing a really hard job with these AI agents that are coming to sit on my right shoulder and help me understand if there's something that I don't that's available in the medical record that I might have missed that was done 6 months ago at a different site.
Yeah, I think you said it well that you might have missed, right? And so we actually just launched with a health system a few months back, and I saw, in this space, and we see a lot of healthcare systems come to us a little bit too late, right? So they had a lung nodule and they missed it, right? And so the patient showed up later, and most recently there was a patient who had they actually had a biopsy performed in the emergency department, and it went unfollowed. Right. And so this patient unfortunately showed back up in the ED 6 months later with the same symptoms, but now their disease had progressed. Where had we had AI in place and had we been able to route that patient to the right care team in real time, they wouldn't have fallen through the cracks, right? That patient would be a cancer survivor today. And unfortunately, their disease now has progressed, and they won't get the same treatment opportunities, and they likely won't have the same outcome, unfortunately. And so I always try to shift AI and automation back to making sure those patients don't fall through the cracks, whether it be, a small lung nodule, whether it be a big, liver mass or pancreatic mass, or actually be a cancer diagnosis. And so, what I've really seen Azra do in a unique way recently is, not just say, these are new cancer patients, right? Make sure you get them connected to care quickly, but be able to slice the patient population by primary site and stage and tumor markers and all different types of things. And as well as the nodules, you don't just have a nodule, but it's grown 5 millimeters in the last 6 months, and it's in the upper lobe of the lung, and it's solitary, right? And they've never smoked, right? The treatment plans look different in those scenarios clinically. And so allowing these patients to not fall through the cracks, but segment the population so they can get connected to the right care quickly is really important in the industry. And I think is kind of a unique way to leverage AI as well in the space. So, Dr. Flora, you are everywhere in the space on panels. You are the editor in chief of your journal, webinars everywhere, and I think the question lies in if healthcare systems want to kick something like this off, they want to start leveraging and using AI. Where would you guide them to get started?
It's a super common question, and unfortunately, it speaks to the desperation of people that I become the person that they're asking. But because I got about 5 years of experience ahead of you guys, but I'll tell you that the questions are consistent. The questions are, how do we do this responsibly? We have 200 clinicians in my building coming to our IT chair, our CIO, and our CMIO, and saying, "I need all of these programs." And you can't do that. We don't have the compute, we don't have the resources, we don't have the IT team members to install all these. So I think what we are looking for at the executive level is probably simplicity, end-to-end solutions rather than 200 different programs. And so that's certainly one of the questions that comes up a lot. They want data privacy, data governance, and just absolute sacrosanct protection of patient health information. These 18 pieces of PHI we're very, very worried about sharing with anyone. So it has to be done under good BAAs or under IRB trials. And then the third thing is probably, is it user friendly? And for that, you really want to evaluate tools that the nurses love. You want tools that the physicians are willing to use because it doesn't add 100 clicks to their day. It actually subtracts from their level of weight that they're trying to bear. And so those things are things that we start with pretty commonly here at St. Elizabeth as we're evaluating products.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to some of the common goals that I have over here at Azra, making sure that when health systems trust you, right, to give them their data, that you're solving a lot of needs. You're not just looking for the incidental finding, the patient that gets in the car wreck and comes into the ED and gets a chest scan, but they actually have a lung nodule, right, that needs to be worked up. Of course, we want to start there. We want to start at the very beginning of the cancer patient's journey, but how do healthcare systems leverage and use one partner, right, in this space? Trust one partner, have one IT setup to solve a lot of needs. And so if we kind of take that same patient, and we kind of walk through the clinical journey of that patient, being able to use AI to identify the patient, right? The patient wins. They are diagnosed early. The healthcare system wins. They don't fall through the cracks. And the care team wins because we automatically can service that patient and enable a really easy way to get that patient to the next steps in the continuum. But even post that, looking at AI to match patients to clinical trials, for example, which I think you are also pretty passionate about in that space. Have you seen that work really well anywhere in particular, any particular space?
Yeah, just think what AI does, and we throw this term around AI. Ultimately, what it is, it's a pattern recognizer right now, right? It's able to take vast miles and petabytes of data and comb through it and find that needle in a haystack that you need. And it may be that it's able to compare exclusion criteria and eligibility criteria quickly and save you a trusted and rare to find CRC or CRN in your research institute. It may be able to seek clinical trials. And we use this old antiquated cancer.gov thing. There are lots and lots of tools right now that are helping match these patients that say these trials are fitting for this patient. That saves physicians and nurses a lot of extra time. So I love that idea. And I also hope that maybe what we'll do, and I mentioned this earlier, is that we'll find that these tools will help us with a greater equitable approach to clinical trial screening. Because right now we're pretty good at enrolling middle-aged white guys. We're not very good at communities of color, of patients that are Black or brown, or patients that are Asian Pacific, or patients that don't look like me. But we need to understand how their bodies work. We need to understand how drugs affect them probably differently, or diseases behave probably differently. and that's going to require heavy lift on our part. And anything we can automate will help there. And then the analysis of the data on the other side, to have these tools to structure this data, to analyze it for us, to make sure that we get the right answers from the data that we've accumulated is incredibly important.
Yeah, the way that I kind of summarize AI and where it is today or where it was, I would say maybe yesterday, is precision, right? Finding that needle in a haystack or structuring and looking for patterns, right, over and over and getting really precise in that space. And so I do think, AI has grown in a really innovative way in that space and continues to get more depth. But what I've seen now and where we're going as well is into what I would call, personalization, right? So how to use AI to personalize the journey for that specific patient. So not only, segmenting clinically, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but making sure that patients have their own personalized, we call it acuity score, but their own personalized analytics around it, right? So to your point, Dr. Flora, we know where your patients are coming from. We know their backgrounds. We know if they come from an area historically that is, has barriers for transportation, for example, right? And so we can say, at this zip code with this background or this clinical history or this religion, even based upon structuring this unstructured data that lives in the EHR, right? There's a ton of valuable information that lives in there, but the ability to get it out and aggregate it in real time and say, this patient is at risk for these things, right? And not just at risk for this type of cancer, but at risk for not being able to get to their daily radiation treatments or not being able to understand what you're saying because English is their second language and we need to proactively have a translator in the room. And so going from precision to personalization and then sending that information to the care team to say, these are the things, right, we need to look out for. And we also want to have the data around those patients, right? How do we make sure that our data is weighted correctly to make sure that African American women, are there? Male breast cancers, right, are included in our breast cancer data, and that once the treatment plan is gathered and is recommended to the patient, that they understand it, and then probably most importantly that they can see it through. And so even things like servicing this information to the care team before they're presented at tumor board, so when the radiation oncologist talks about the radiation plan for the patient, the navigator can proactively speak up and say, that patient doesn't drive, that patient's blind, that patient lives in an area where they rarely ever speak English, right? How do we prepare for this? Because not only do we want them to get connected to care, we want them to have access to the trials, but we want them to get the treatment that they want, right? And we want them to have opportunity to have access to all of the options, right, that meet their needs. And one thing that comes to mind is religion. And so, there's been so many patients that I've had the opportunity to interact with where their care, their treatment plan that someone like a Dr. Flora would put together is wonderful, right? It's by the guidelines, it's innovative, it's new, it's going to work, but it doesn't fall in line with what they believe, right, should take place. And maybe they can't get the transfusions, right? Because it's not them, it's not what they do, and that's not what they want. And so making sure that we can segment and look at data and use AI to now not only say, okay, precise, this is precision, right? This is this patient, this needle in the haystack, but now personalize proactively the care is a really unique area in which, I think Azra is going, but AI as a whole as well.
Yeah, it's a terribly exciting time to see. We have tools now that can think faster than we can, and that's what artificial intelligence means. And as these things are getting better every 3 months, I worked with them probably for 12 hours this weekend on other projects, and I felt like I did maybe 80 hours worth of work using 3 or 4 different GPT models or using Perplexity. And I guess my goal for starting the journal, my goal for doing podcasts and webinars like this is just to try and inspire a little bit of curiosity so the user groups start to play with these things themselves on their weekend. I can't convince you it's going to cure all ails. I can't convince you that it's going to, and nor should I. But I can hopefully make you curious enough that you dig in and you log on and you start to do searches on Perplexity, or you start to write a business plan with GPT-4 or whatever it is that you need to do to make your day easier. For me, on my second screen all day long, I've got GPT-4 Omni and Perplexity open, and it's everything I do. I don't use any more search engines. It's all Perplexity. It's so much better and faster and smarter. Gives you all the references. The algorithm's smarter. On the same token, anything that I need to write, a press release, automatic email replies in Copilot, I'm seeking things that let me have more moments with the people that I care about, whether it's the people in my charge at work, the staff that I work with here, my friends down the hall, and my teams, or the patients. And man, this stuff frees you up to do the things that you said you wanted to do when you went into medicine. And so I understand that there's some trepidation because it's new, but we've done this once before. It was the electronic medical record, and we were not at the table. And so what we instead inherited was this unwieldy billing software that is not user friendly, that doesn't really enhance my day or the care of my patients. It has me looking away from them, typing notes while we're in the room. So I just wanted to be facile about this stuff. As AI hit, I figured it was going to come quickly, and it's come even faster than anyone who's writing these tools, designing these tools expected. And now I want clinicians and nurses at the table to try and contribute meaningfully to the development of tools like yours or others to say, let's make sure that we keep the users in mind so that we're not making nurses cry when an administrator tries to solve a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about the weekend. We've talked a lot about getting more time back with the patients and their family, but you can also get home to your own family quicker now, and be more present for them. And you guys and everyone in oncology and in healthcare in general, right, carry a load home with you frequently. And so being able to disconnect quicker, sooner, better, easier, and reconnect, right, with your family and those things that kind of refresh you also allows you to be the best version of yourself the next day. That's a huge piece of oncology navigation. And as we expand into different areas, I've seen it consistently, navigating spine lesions or navigating neuro patients or cardiology patients. It's similar, right? These care team members, these healthcare members are now able to unplug, refresh, come back, and be a better version of themselves. And so, AI is not only affecting the patient and their work, but they feel better about what they're doing and they're able to be the best version of themselves too, because they can, get home and have their work be complete, right? So I think it's so important to also think about the other side of AI that allows you to unplug as well, or write your emails, Dr. Flora, for you so that you can go home.
Please, if I've sent you an email, do not take offense. I write it, and then the computer makes it sound more eloquent and checks my grammar so I don't have too many
I
commas
think
and
we've all been
hyphens.
there.
Yeah. I should point this out. I worked this weekend because I was doing things I was passionate about. Um, I had available time because I'm an empty nester. I'm not suggesting that we have to find these tools that automate your life and then replace it with more work. That's just my own nuttiness. I've always been that way. Um, I don't want to make my physician's documentation better and easier with one of these ambient scribes so that I can fit four more patients in their day. That's not the goal. And that's why I really want doctors at the table. I want to free up that hour or hour and 20 minutes or hour and 40 minutes so they can spend that facing their patients, so they can spend that thinking, so they can spend that time talking to their colleagues, not so we can cram things in more tightly. So I want to make sure we take a beat and make sure that people understand that this is not about finding efficiencies so you can do more work. It's finding efficiencies so you can do less numbing work and you can choose how to spend those moments that you recover.
Yeah, that's a good point, because oftentimes we're asked, well, how many more patients will they navigate? And what we find out when we dig into programs is, well, you'll actually navigate. So it may not be more patients, but let me tell you what you're doing today and let me walk you through, a patient's experience in your healthcare system today with navigation, and then let me show you what that's going to look like. So one example comes to mind where, these navigators were getting manual referrals when a patient's entire world was on fire. It was too late, right? And the day we kicked off our technology, one of the navigators was a few minutes late to the meeting. She said a patient had turned her around in the hallway and was like, "Hey, I need, a ride, or I need this." Like, I forgot like the exact example, but she needed something. And she was like, "Well, I'm the navigator. Like, I can help you." And she's like, "Where were you when I got diagnosed 6 months ago? Like, where have you been?"
Well,
And she's like, I wish I knew about you too, right? Like, I wish I could have known and helped you. And so, not requiring these manual referrals or this manual work to get patients connected to their care team, is a huge, opportunity for the patients and for the navigators themselves. So, we don't necessarily say, oh, you're going to navigate way more patients, although sometimes you do, but you're actually going to navigate them, right? You're going to proactively be able to work with them. They're going to know you, right? We can see it through the patient, reported outcomes. We can see it through the navigators and the registrars or the oncology data specialists. We can see it through their survey results that they're better, happier. They feel more accomplished in their role. And at the end of the day, it's what they signed up to do, right? And that's what they want to do. But they want to be able to do it well. And everybody wants to do a good job, for the patients that were impacted.
I'll go back. There's an article I share widely that everybody who works near me, I end up emailing it to them. It's a concept called job to be done. It's a very, very famous management practice from a guy named Clayton Christensen, who was at Harvard Business School. And for those of you that are readers, it was September 2016, and it's the customer's job to be done. But what he distills this all down to is that innovators are supposed to spend our time identifying poorly performed jobs, why someone would hire us if we're buying a milkshake, or why you would hire a milkshake, or why are you choosing a certain person to do a job, whether you're a patient, whether you're a tumor registrar, whether you're a nurse. But we're supposed to identify the problems that our customers, in my world, patients, need solved. And then you design products and experiences and processes around those needs. And what AI does better than anything else I've discovered so far is it adapts to those needs so quickly. And the innovations that we're seeing now in AI in 3 months outpace things that used to take 2 or 3 years. If I speak just to go off a little bit in a tangent, more of a tangent, look at drug discovery now. This was a Nobel Prize in chemistry about a month or two ago. Three physician scientists received the Nobel Prize in chemistry for an AI tool through Google's DeepMind and AlphaFold that was able to unravel all the code of life, every protein that could ever be generated in the future of the world. They were able to predict with a high degree of specificity. So drug discovery now, instead of taking 10 years and 1,000 PhDs at 1,000 desks, we can take 60 billion compounds, get down to 30 in a couple days, end up with two that are the most likely to help and be absorbed and not have drug-drug interactions, and then test those in the clinics. And so talk about a job to be done. Let's find drugs that cure cancer with less toxicities. And as you mentioned, more personalization and precision. That's the stuff that gets me excited as a physician.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Innovate Oncology podcast, subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform so that you're notified when new episodes are released.
I often work with, the end users being the oncology data specialists and the navigators and the like. What are barriers to implementing AI with physicians and oncologists like yourself?
There's a lot. I would say number one is trust. And we're about to publish an article in my journal about that, about overcoming this distrust of these tools because they're so new. I think we'll get there. I think everybody's using AI in their normal lives when they're nudged into the next episode of Schitt's Creek on Netflix, or you're talking to Siri or Alexa, or even your nuanced dictaphone without the ambient is all AI, and you're using it. You just may not be counting it as using AI. So I think as we overcome the trust barrier, where I see the limits on the pace of innovation, one is budget, and I think you have to help us understand as vendors the ROI that we can take to our CFO and our COO, because most systems are not especially well. Most systems are not especially well resourced right now. Healthcare is a tough business to be in, and there are people that are responsible for keeping the lights on, and they can't just chase every shiny thing that I, the physician, think is important for my patients, especially when you've got thousands of them in your system. I do think IT staffing is a thing, and so the easier we can make these relationships to be partnerships between vendors and hospital systems to try and relieve some of the burdens for the IT teams that are asked to do these heavy lifts, these installs, and then I think where I would say probably for most of us, it's just fire bullets before cannonballs. Get started on a small pilot, pick a problem. This is a problem we need to solve. Investigate the best artificial intelligence solutions that you can to address that unique small problem. And it might be that your tumor registry is lagging 4 months behind. It might be that you can't find staff to do the job. It might be that you're struggling to screen patients for clinical trials. Whatever that small, discrete thing is, pick that and run a pilot. Small things. Bullets before cannonballs means that you're not using all your giant artillery. You're not spending $1 million on something. You're going to get started with something that's reasonable, that's realistic, and you're going to identify, you're going to learn along the way. And so that's where I would encourage most healthcare systems. And I do when I go out and I consult with healthcare systems, or I do board education, or we're talking to people that are trying to figure this thing out. We usually will start with that one problem, pick a solution, go for it, and see what you can learn along the way. And I think most people we've worked with have been pleased with the results that way.
Absolutely. And most healthcare systems that we work with, I think, are taking your advice. Start small, right? Pick what it is you're trying to solve, and then expand from there. And so we often will start with the registry operations, those healthcare systems that are contracting out, the labor, and try to save some of that money there, right? To expand our technology to automate the oncology navigation offerings. And so, absolutely, start in lung, right? Then go to liver or pancreas, or start with registry, then go to navigation, or start with lung screening and tracking, and look at the data, prove success, and then expand right to a different area. So I love that approach. And I am absolutely seeing that in the healthcare space today with our technology as well.
Good. We should. And I'd say the other thing for the clinicians is you have to read. We didn't understand genetics after we were second year medical school. We were not immunologists until a couple of years ago, and oncologists have to keep up because things are moving so quickly. And the things that we've discussed today may actually affect your patient's survival more than choosing the right chemotherapy regimen. So I'd say put in the time that you put in when you need to learn about next generation sequencing or minimal residual disease. Put in the time that you spent on immunology and learning how to use these immunotherapeutics and manage their toxicities. You evolved when it was a purely scientific thing that could help patients. I would suggest that this is going to dwarf the benefits there. And if you can harness these tools for the greater good for your patients, you will be very pleased, not just with the quality of your day, the quality of your lives, but the quality of the care that you're able to afford that patient because you got help finally.
Thanks so much for listening to the Innovate Oncology podcast presented by Azra AI. If you'd like to learn more about the matters discussed in this episode, check out the description below for more information. Join in on the conversation when you follow Azra AI on LinkedIn or visit our website, azra-ai.com.